As Barbara was saying, Director of Technology Consulting. We used to be called CRC Server Group. We're kind of expanding our mandate a little bit beyond server administration. So if for the time being, CRC Server Group and Technology Consulting, pretty interchangeable. I do work in IT services, university IT. So today we're going to talk about two options for dealing with your files, your data. Either Filer and Box are going to be the two things that we're going to be talking about. These are options to both share your files and to store your stuff. There are two different ways. I'm going to call it the HS Filer, just to give it a name that is appropriate for humanities and science. It's like a traditional file server. It's something that you connect to and you work off the file server. Box, on the other hand, is a cloud-based option that works a little differently, but and I'll go over some of the strengths and weaknesses of that. The Filer is available for everyone in H&S. It is an H&S technology. It's provided by the Dean's Office, and it is available to all the different departments. It may not be the best solution, but it is a solution. Box, on the other hand, is available to everyone in the university. It is pervasive, and that's one of the things that makes it actually a really great technology is because a lot of people are using it. It's like one of those things that the more people who use it, the more value you get out of it. Filer is currently free to departments. It is something that Barbara's office is providing to different constituents. Box, on the other hand, is free for every full sponsored SUNET IDs. This is versus free sponsored SUNET IDs. And Box has a quota. It's 25 gigs right now. You can pay for more if you want. And there's a 5 gig maximum file size, which sounds like a lot, but there are certainly use cases where people have large videos where Box might not be the best solution because you can't upload something that might be a large video. So what is the Filer? So the Filer, I call it an enterprise file server. It's analogous to your department file server. You can access it using your Mac or your Windows or your PC, or Windows or your Linux system. There's no extra software to install. It's there and you connect to it. Again, this is kind of old school. There are different ways to connect. These names over here, you don't have to worry about it, but it basically is the built-in way to connect to the Filer from your Mac or PC. If you're a scientist or a researcher or use a Linux system, NFS is the thing that might be important to you that you will want to know. And we make that available to NFS for those that need that. You can access it from anywhere on campus. And if you are off campus, you can connect to it using VPN. If you've used VPN to connect to campus resources, it's the same effort. And then the thing that I'm really going to talk a lot about is managing access via workgroups. I'll get to that a little later. So again, this is a replacement for your department file server, the little thing that used to be in your cupboard or maybe under somebody's desk, that file server that everybody connects to. It's intended to replace that. Box, on the other hand, well, Box is a little different if you've used it before. It's a secure cloud-based file sharing system. So the servers are not here on campus. It's not under somebody's desk. It's in the cloud. You can think of it as Dropbox on steroids. If you've used Dropbox before, it's along those lines. It's kind of like the enterprise version of Dropbox. You don't connect to the server. You don't connect to much the same way like you would in a Filer. You actually access your stuff using a web browser or the desktop sync tool, which I'll talk about in a minute. And the cool thing about Box is that you can actually scroll back to previous versions. So maybe you have an Excel spreadsheet and you want to see something has changed, and you could actually roll back to previous versions. That's kind of a cool thing with Box. The desktop sync is something that I'll talk about in a minute. Box you can access from your mobile device, your iPad or your iPhone or your Windows tablet, all sorts of things that you can access Box. And there are other really cool things about Box being a cloud service is that it integrates with lots of other cool technologies. When you go to Box, I'll show it in a second, there are these apps that you can kind of use with Box that allow extended functionality. You create not much like Google Docs, but you can do it within Box. I do want to make a mention, though, that the School of Medicine has their own Box instance. They have their own Box subscription. It's called Medicine Box, which is pretty clever. And it behaves a little differently. For medicine folks, for School of Medicine folks, they have to deal a lot with prohibited and restricted data, personal protected health information. So their box instance is slightly different from university box. The same back end, same technology, but there's some slight differences. Can't talk about data without talking about data classification. So today, March 31st, last day of March, we have prohibited, restricted, confidential, and unrestricted. We used to be called public. These are different data classifications. Certainly nothing in this list is new here. But I do want to give a heads up. This is going to be refined a little bit and clarified a little further coming up real soon, where we'll be talking effectively, and I'm kind of simplifying it here, but you can kind of take prohibited and restricted and collapse it down into one category. And then there'll be confidential and unrestricted. It's sort of like low, medium, and high risk. I've always had a thinking about how data is prohibited, because there's certainly use cases where data is prohibited. So that's going to change in the next couple of weeks, where we're going to have it a little simpler, low, medium, and high risk. So the filer is good for moderate and low risk. And I'm using the newer terms because, again, real soon we'll be using these new terms. But in other words, you could think of as the filer as confidential and public data, moderate and low risk data. University box is also good for moderate and low risk data. Things that it's not good for, again, the protected health information, social security numbers. And that's because it's going to be stored offsite in the cloud. And the School of Medicine has some extra stuff around there to handle that kind of data, but the general university box does not. So please don't put social security numbers, passport numbers, PHI, that kind of stuff in either the filer or box. And if you do have a need, a real business need to handle passports and social security numbers and patient test results, talk to us, and we'll build something out custom for you. So getting started with the filer. The filer actually just starts with a helps you ticket, like much of stuff on campus. It'll go to my team, and you'll say something like, my department needs space in the filer. Pretty easy. The three different groups that will support this will have different roles. So my group, Technology Consulting, will probably email you back and say, well, how much space do you need? And you don't have to be exact. We'll give you more than you need. To give you lots of breathing room, but we'll ask a couple questions about how much space you need. And the other question that we'll ask you is a little bit about your admin. So your department will need to identify somebody who we can work with to who regulates access to it. And I'll talk about this in a bit. CRC desktop folks, they will help you connect to the filer. Again, it's really easy. It's built into your Mac or your PC, but they'll give you a little bit of setup assistance there. Or for example, if you're going to connect off campus, they'll help you out with the VPN stuff as well. And then what your department is, one of the best things about filer and box is that it is geared to be self-service, in that your department can help add people to this folder, remove this person to have access. You don't want to give the finance folder to the intern and vice, So you will be able to identify folks in your organization who can take responsibility for adding them or removing their access by changing up the work groups. It's a very simple tool, and I'll get to that. Again, Mac, Windows, or Linux. And I could show you just a little bit of what that looks like. Hopefully, that's how it works. On the Mac side of things, and this is a Mac, hopefully. There we go, great. A Mac like any other Mac. And so if I wanted to connect to the server, I could go up here to the Go menu way up here. And I would say Go connect to server. And then I would type in the address. You only have to do this once. At some point or another, a lot of people, what they do is they create little shortcuts on their desktop. So once we do it, you can create a shortcut on your desktop. You'll double click it, and you'll connect to the filer. Makes it a little easier. And I'm going to pick on the Stanford Live folks here, because we know they use this a lot. And here's your your regular connection dialog box. In this case, it's going to be a SUNET ID. Now mine might be a little different because I have administrative privileges. So I'm gonna type mine out. That looks a little different from what yours might look like. In this case, I have a different domain account, but you would use win and then your SUNET ID. Pretty easy. And there it is. You know, nothing too exciting. We've all seen similar file servers. And here are your folders. And actually, here's Stanford Live's folders. And you can see that they've arranged their folders here by different functions. And what you said before about you probably don't want your interns having access to the finance, or your HR folks need access to sensitive data, you can control the access to these folders yourself. But you know, and if you wanted to update spreadsheets and stuff like that, you would click on a file and open it up and do your work. Again, it's a replacement for the department file server. It's thinking. There we go. On a Windows system, I don't have a Windows system, but it's much the same way. You map a drive. If you've connected to a file server before on a Windows machine, it's just as easy. The Linux systems might be a little more complicated using NFS, and so the CRC desktop folks will help you with that if you need assistance. Again, you're using your SUNET ID and your password. There's no need for two-step authentication, which is kind of nice. So you're just connecting to the file server. Because it's using your SUNET ID and password, if you win the lottery and don't show up for work the next day, your account will ultimately be deactivated, and there's no extra steps that you need to take. If you are working off campus, though, as I will be probably soon because I'll be going home and not contaminating people, you would need the VPN to connect from home. Here's our URL that will, oops, if you need information on the VPN, but you can also call 5help and they'll walk you through how to connect using the VPN. And so you'll make a connection if you're working from home using the VPN software first, and then connect as you would on campus if you've done that already before. A couple words, you know, your home connections, they tend to be a lot slower than what you have on campus, so you'll have to adjust your expectations a little bit. It might be better to just drag your files down to your desktop and do your work and then upload it if you're working remotely. And a little reminder, VPN is now using two-step authentication, so make sure you have your phone or your dongle to be able to type in the code. Another thing about the filer, the data is protected. I said that one of the great things about Box is that you could go back to previous versions. You could do something similar with the filer. It's a little more complicated, but it is in effect your ability to roll back some changes if you needed to access past versions. Again, I don't have a Windows machine, but when you connect to the filer, you can navigate to the file that you want to open. Maybe it's an Excel spreadsheet. Maybe you want to access the version that you had last week because something, you know, your pivot tables got all whacked out. You can actually right-click on the file on Windows, and then you'll have an option that says previous versions. And you can select the one that you want, and it'll restore that version. That gives you a little bit of protection knowing that if you accidentally delete it or if you make some unintended changes, you can roll back. Mac users do have that, don't have that ability within the operating system, so put in a helps you ticket and we'll help you restore a past version. You'll have to say something like, I want the version from last Tuesday or something like that, and we'll help that and get that to you, and we'll just put it back on the file server so that next time you connect, it'll be there. And just for protection, we do back up the entire filer using good old tape backup. It's more for disaster recovery. So God forbid something terrible happens to the filer and the whole thing kind of melts down. At least we have the ability to restore the entire thing. So I want to talk a little bit about using work groups. Is this a familiar concept? Are people using work groups a lot for accessing things? Same interface, same technology. The old school way was to create local accounts on the server, so a special username and a special password just to connect to the server. Nowadays, everything kind of integrates with the campus central directory, so we create these work groups, and we don't have to use these one-off accounts. We can continue to use our SUNET IDs. We manage them using Workgroup Manager. Workgroup Manager is the name of the tool, and this is the URL. So I'll kind of quickly show what that would look like. If you haven't used Workgroup Manager before, It's a pretty great thing. You'll see all of my work groups. I use it extensively with my clients. This is Workgroup Manager. When you log in, it'll show you all the ones that you're a member of, things that you may not even be aware that you're a member of. And you may be a member of it because there's a sense of inheritance. So maybe we take this work group and we make this work group a member of that work group. And so you may find that you're a member of lots of different work groups. That's okay, they're free. So you have all of these different work groups over here. And this is the interface that someone in your department can use to edit the membership of it. So if somebody joins your staff and you want to have them give them access to the finance folder, it's very simple. You just click on one of these here. And here are the current members of the work group. And I could just find and add a member and have this little dialog box that'll tell me, you just need to know their SUNET ID, or you could look it up, and you'll add that person to the work group, and it takes effect immediately, which is also really great. Again, the benefit of this is that you don't have to put in a helps you ticket saying Jane Doe just joined our staff and she needs access to this folder, and then it goes through the pneumatic tubes, and somebody will get to it, and then they'll make the adjustment, and then they'll loop back with you. Someone in your department can do this instomatically. So that's the benefits of using Workgroup Manager, and whatever is in here is the filer pays attention to. I'm just going to use this because it's taking a little while to kind of toggle back and forth. So rather than do the display mode, it'll be easier. Okay, so I can't access your work groups. Normally, I can't modify your work groups. If I'm not a member of your work group and I'm not an administrator of your work group, I have no business modifying your work group. So they're very particular, and it makes sense to identify individuals in your department who have the ability, usually like an admin or a department head, who has the ability to modify your work groups. And this is a little safety feature to make sure that you don't have some unintended consequences here. One strategy is to create work groups for every folder in your filer, but you can also create just a work group for the portion of the filer, the share of your filer. So if we create a share for the basket weaving department, a simple way to do it is to have everybody in a group called basket weaving all access, and we'll give them all access to everything in the basket weaving file share. But an alternative strategy is to kind of assign different permissions to different folders underneath. It's a little more tricky, and it adds a layer of complication that you may regret later because you're like, oh, do they have access to this and do they have access to that? So my recommendation is to keep it simple, if you can give workgroup access to a whole share that we'll provision for you, and the shares will create many shares for you if you want to have separate shares. Rather than separate folders, and each one will have its own access. If you do have contractors or vendors, a nice thing about this is that you could give them a free sponsored SUNET ID. So you go to sponsorship.stanford.edu. You could create a sponsored SUNET ID for that individual, and then that vendor will have access to the stuff that you can add them to your work groups. And this is a great way of working with collaborators from other institutions, or maybe your web developer or your contractor who might need access. And again, another thing about this is that if the person wins the lottery or leaves the university, their SUNET IDs are deactivated automatically. So Box, the cool thing about Box is it also uses the same Workgroup Manager. So when you create groups in Workgroup Manager, you could reuse those, you could repurpose those work groups for many different things, including the filer, but also in Box. So you don't need to create special Box work groups and special filer work groups. Just create one group and just assign it to different things. I will show you what it looks like to create a work group. Pretty simple interface. I'm going to choose the option right over here, create a new work group. And I'm going to give it a name. And the first thing that you see in this pull-down menu over here when you're creating a new work group is something called a stem. Now, work groups have to be a part of something or another, much like a hierarchy of things. sometimes we'll create a brand new STEM just for your purpose, maybe just for your department, and you probably already have access to STEMs that might be in your department or maybe they're for special purpose. Everyone always has a personal STEM as well that's just for them. You'll see I have a couple different options. One of them is a personal one over here, but we do a lot of work with Cantor, and so I have the ability to create a new work group associated with Cantor. I also have the ability to create a new work group associated with the Dean's Office. So in this instance, I'm going to create a new, your list might not look like this, and we can change that. We can always give you access, put in a request, and give you the ability to create new work groups associated with a department or a school or a special project. And then you got to give it a name of some sort or another. My special work group. And this is just, the description is used only just to help you out and remember what was that group for. And so I'm going to create the work group right now. I have no members in my work group right now, so now I'm going to just add a couple people. I'm going to add Karen Zach, works in CRC. And in fact, I want to be able to give Karen the ability to create, to modify this work group, because right now she's just a regular member, so I want to be able to make her an admin. Let's see here. And this way I could say, hey Karen, could you add this new employee and give her access to all of our stuff in Box or in the filer. So that's a simple way of creating and managing work groups, and this will persist, this work group. Great way to regulate access. When I started to talk about Box and how it uses work groups, one of the best things about that is that there is a tool, it's called a work group integration tool. Not the sexiest name, but effective. Workgroup integration tool basically links the groups that you've created in Workgroup Manager, like the one I just did, and it creates a linkage with different services. Now, the filer already uses that, but the step that you have to take for Box in order for Box to understand your workgroups is this tool called Workgroup Integration. It's an extra step, but you only have to do it once. And so if I go to tools.stanford.edu, it's in my slide, tools.stanford.edu, and you authenticate, you will see a very long list of work groups. Yours won't look like mine. Hopefully it's a little shorter. Work group integration. And there's a little blurb here that will tell you about Box groups. And it's the interface that allows you to make changes so that rather than create groups in Box, share this to Tom, Dick, and Harry, I could create a work group called My Favorite People, and you can manage your Box sharing in Workgroup Manager rather than within Box. But you have to make that linkage first. So here you have my list of work groups, and I'm going to refresh this page because I should see here. Here's the one that I just created. My special work group. Here it is in my list of work groups. And I'm going to check the option to add this linkage with Box.com. It doesn't exist automatically. You have to take the extra step of making that work group linkage. So I click the button here, and I'm going to link this work group with Box. And it's letting me know it's going to take a minute or two. So we'll let that kind of work its way out. But basically what is happening now is there's a communication between the Stanford campus and the Box cloud, and we're making sure that Box is aware that we've created a group in Workgroup Manager, and Box is getting updated. And that update, that communication between our Workgroup Manager here on campus and Box happens throughout the day. You can make these changes, and they'll be reflected in Box in short order. So I made this workgroup linkage. It's going to be happening in the back, and then we'll loop back to see what it looks like once I log into Box. All right, a little bit of word about Box. So when you, I've said that everybody has access to Box, and you have a 25 gig quota. But what happens if I'm sharing my files with you, for example, and it's not my day, I walk across the street, I get hit by a minibus. What happens to all my files? You won't have access to it, and there's a potential that my files that are associated with my Box instance kind of go along with me, and then my unfortunate early demise. Well, the solution to this is to actually create work groups and have your work groups own the files. So that way, the membership of the work group can actually change over time. You can add people and remove people, but the files aren't associated with a key individual. And this is a key concept to learn, because it will mean that you don't have to worry about that one person holding all of that data, leaving your university and losing that access. It means that you'll be able to upload things to your workgroup box, the box folder that's owned by the workgroup. All the members of that workgroup will be able to do that, and then the membership of the workgroup can change, but the files will persist. So they're not owned by any individual, but they're owned by the workgroup. I'll show you it may not be there yet, but I'm going to log into Box to see if that workgroup linkage has done what I hoped it to do. You will see I've logged into Box separately, and you see my Box looks just like a lot of other people's here. And it doesn't look like it's made it quite yet. It takes a little bit of a while for it to happen, but I'll use these as examples. These here, with this little people icon, tell me that these are folders that are owned by a work group, rather than this little yellow one that makes it look like it's owned by me. So here's in this case, the department firewall documentation and the CRC consultants here, these are work group owned folders, and everybody who is in this work group has access to this folder. And when you add a new person to your staff and you go to Workgroup Manager and you've added that new person, she'll have that folder automatically appear when she logs into Box, because it's automatically shared. And in a moment or two, this will get updated with the group that I just created a moment ago. One of the other key things about working with Box is not only can you have workgroups own folders, those workgroups also have a 25 gig folder quota, by the way. That workgroup, that could be a department, it could be a special project, that workgroup own folder, you can actually share out with other workgroups quite easily. And it may not be the most intuitive thing in the world, so I'm going to show you what it looks like here. Let's see here. Here's some folders that I've been working on here, and maybe I want to share this with the HNS IT support team. I don't want to have to type out all 20 members of the team and each one and add them so that they have access. I just want to add a group. So I'm gonna change the sharing on this by going to inviting collaborators. Now, again, I could type in, Barbara Jacobs, and I can find her, and I can add her, and then I can remember to add everybody. But it would be much easier if I could just find the actual group and share it with the group. Like this one right here. So I just picked this here. This is a work group called Grad Aid Tool. And so rather than sharing it with each individual, I'm just going to share it with that work group. I'm going to give them the ability to do everything with it. They can add it, they could remove it, they could edit it. And in fact, when I hit this invitation, I don't have to worry about somebody hitting yes, I will accept it, or responding to my invitation. I've invited the work group as a collaborator, and the work group is automatically going to accept it. So at this point, I'm sharing out this folder up there at the top with the entire Grad Aid work group. And then if there's a new person who's working on that project, someone on that group can go ahead and edit and add that person to work group, and automatically they'll have access to this. A little pro tip. When you're sharing with a work group, it'll look a little funny. I started to type out something here. and it automatically starts to find things based on as I type along here. This right here, don't share with this. This is the art. I call it the fake user. It's like the work group fake user. This is not the actual group, but this is the fake user that owns the folder or owns different folders here. And you can tell because it says hsdo at workgroup-linkage.stanford.edu. I was doing this. I was sharing with this kind of user, these ones over here, and it wasn't getting what I was wanting. So what I learned is that you have to look for this. Make sure it says group. Because if you share it with a fake user, nobody will have access. So make sure you're sharing it with this thing called group here. And it might take a little bit of typing, and you might have to kind of go back to Workgroup Manager to kind of remember what the name is. But you know, all the group ones have these colons in here, so that'll help you find it out a little bit. All right. So sharing files with Box off campus. This one is another killer feature on why I think Box can really replace a lot of department file servers. Because it makes sharing with off campus so much easier. And if you haven't done this before, this is one of those key killer features. I'm going to share this folder here, a Summit confirmation registration, just picking a random file. There are some advanced features that you would want to know about. One of them is that you can create a custom URL. So rather than this gigantically long, complicated thing, you might want to make it real snappy and say something like AWS Conf or something that's a little more human readable. You could set the custom URL here. And that's nice because if maybe you have promotional material that you want to encourage people to download your PDFs, and so you put it on a flyer. Rather than put this gigantically ugly thing, you can make it a snappy little URL and put that on your promotional material, for example. You could also set the link expiration. So this link will self-destruct after 30 days. And this will prevent people from downloading your stuff. That's a really great key feature if you want to just kind of keep people from being able to access it forever. Another thing that you can do is, let's see here. You can have people password protect the actual download rather than spend time looking for it. There's an option in sharing that'll allow you to put a password on it so that you can share it if you're concerned that the URL might be distributed widely with your vendor, for example, and you only want it to go to this person and you're concerned that everybody will see it, you can give assign a password to that URL so that if your contractor in the other side of the world wants to download this link, they'll have to know the password. So it's an optional thing, but it gives you a degree of, in addition to sort of the self-expiring URLs, it's a nice way of regulating access to these kind of things. And that's stuff that you can't really do with a filer very easily. And in addition, you can also see who's accessing the notification. So you actually can see who's downloaded your stuff. You'll get an email. You can configure this, but you could get an email when Jane Doe that you wanted her to download that file. She's downloaded it. You've got a notification. Now you can go ahead and just delete the file if you're concerned. All right. Another advanced feature with Box is that admittedly, working off of a web browser is kind of an annoying thing. You have to go to the web browser, you drag it down to your desktop, and then you do whatever it is that you want to do, and then you drag it up. Box makes available for free something called the desktop sync function. And it's an application that you install on your Mac or PC. And it is a self-updating application. And what it does is it will, the files that you have, folders that you've identified in Box that you want to have access on your local machine, you check a box, and then from evermore, whatever's on your computer will automatically be in sync with the cloud and your other computers as well. So maybe you have a computer at home, maybe you have a computer at your office, and you want to be able to, and maybe you're sharing it with an entire work group. What you can do is use the Box Desktop Sync, and again, this is sort of like Dropbox. If this looks a little familiar, that's what it's a lot like. It gives you the ability to be able to keep your data in sync with multiple computers and also the cloud. So rather than download that Excel spreadsheet, do what you need to do, and then upload it back up to the web browser, it's there on your computer already. All you need to do is just navigate to the folder that you have on your computer called Box Sync. It's in your home directory. And then manipulate the file, do whatever you need to do. You don't need to take any actions. It automatically knows that you've edited the file, and it'll upload it up to the cloud. And you still have the ability to go back and look at your different versions. So you can work with Box without ever using the web interface. Just using the desktop sync tool allows you to make sure that all your computers have the latest version of the file that you're working with, and you also have the ability to protect your data. And you don't have to share everything, all 25 gigs of your quota. You can select certain files. And anybody else who has that desktop sync, if you've shared it out with a work group, if they too have the desktop sync function, when you've edited on your machine, every person who's using desktop sync and has access to that folder will have their version updated as well. So it kind of gives you the guarantee that everybody's working on the same thing. All right. So what I've covered is basically the filer and a little advanced, maybe not 101, but maybe 102, advanced Box class on some of the key functions of Box. But there are some other options that are out there that are really great to know about. One of the things about the filer is that it's not great for, say, databases. Things that require super fast connections with the server. The filer is great for Office files and images and PDF and research material, but it's not good for research computing. It's not intended to do that. So there are options from University IT that are dedicated just for that kind of usage. We also have Google Drive. Everybody has access to Google Drive, everybody with a full sponsored SUNET ID. Great thing about Google Drive, it's unlimited storage. It really is unlimited. It's kind of cool. And whereas Box has a 25 gig file size, Google Drive has a 5 terabyte maximum file size. It also integrates with Workgroup Manager. In fact, you may have seen that as I was showing you the Workgroup integration tool. You will see, looking here at Cantor, there is the Google Groups over here. So not only can I I can use the Workgroup integration tool to link with Box, I can use the Workgroup integration tool to link with Google. And so that way I can actually share in Google with a workgroup rather than all 25 people of a department that I have to type out their names. So if I was to enable this feature, Google Group, and add, after a quick spell, Google would become aware, and it would learn that any time there was a change in Workgroup Manager, its workgroups would change, its Google Groups would change. Google Drive. The only thing that's different about Google Drive is that there's, just like in Box when I said the workgroup owns the folder, I'm not aware of anything in Box that you can create analogous to that where there's a workgroup that owns a Google Drive. So Google Drive is more on a person-to-person, but you could transfer ownership of files. So maybe if you know you're going to win the lottery tomorrow and you're pressing it, you can, yes?
So we've requested that of Google?
Yeah.
They're claiming now that it's on their roadmap, but it will be a while. So if you need a department to own the files, Box is a better option. If you need simultaneous edits, Google's a better option.
Yep. Great. So it also has desktop sync, much like Box does. It'll keep the folders that you've identified on your computer that you want synchronized. Google Drive will also do that. And Google Drive also has a really great mobile app as well, much like Box. We do know that Office 365 is coming around the corner, and it will include OneDrive. It may not be at the, maybe you have an update on this, but it may not be at the same time that we release the email and calendar application with Office 365, but it is intended to come to campus. And I think the functionality of OneDrive is probably quite similar to Google Drive in that you have unlimited access and, yeah.
Small interruption.
Yes.
Office 365, another one in this room may be aware what that is.
Oh, sure. Okay, sure, of course. Office 365 is the campus's next generation email and calendaring collaboration tool. It's a Microsoft product. It is, you could think of it as Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel in the cloud. It is also Outlook or Exchange in the cloud. So it gives you the functionality that we have with Zimbra to have meetings and calendar invites and also your regular email. But it is web-based. That's Office 365, and that's coming out soon this year.
I think Jessica's next. Perhaps I'll need to find her face. I think Jessica's next then is talking about Xamper's going away, Office 365 is coming, so that's
On
coming
the
up
horizon.
into a outreach event near you.
Amazon has made an announcement recently, their cloud drive. It's a $60 a year unlimited storage. I would advise you not to use that. We have Google Drive gives you the unlimited storage. It gives you the a very large maximum file size. There really isn't anything compelling to use Amazon's cloud drive, which is geared towards consumers. There is also, you're probably aware of AWS Glacier, which is a low-cost storage in the cloud. Doesn't compete with free, but it is an option, but it is geared towards enterprise. It's not user-friendly. You can't just upload a file very easily to Google, to Amazon Glacier. There are ways to access it programmatically that a system administrator might have, but it's not intended. So this one's almost too enterprise, and this one's too consumer. And these technologies over here are really great because they're pervasive. They're supportable. You'll be able to call 5help and get some help with that. You call 5help and say, I need something with my Amazon or my Amazon Cloud Drive. You're not going to get a whole lot of assistance. They'll be rather limited with that. And then be wary of going off the ranch. I showed you the secure computing when I was talking about data classification. The Information Security Office has lots of information on in the data classification link right over here. Talks a little bit about vendors that are approved for different classifications of data. So be very sensitive and don't go off the ranch. If you're going to be uploading your data to billybobscheapfileserving.com, there's a couple risks there. It could be an untrustworthy vendor. It could be a fly-by-night operation. It might be that maybe they're not taking care of the data the way that we expect some of our other vendors to do. So we have a list of the box.com here instance and how you can use it. But other things like we have a relationship with Google for Google Drive. We have a relationship with Microsoft for when it comes out, Office 365. Try not to go off the ranch because it may look really compelling, but it might bite you in the behind later.